Let's discuss that a bit further. We're joined now by Professor Lyal Sunga, who is a visiting professor at Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. He's joining us now from Rome. Lyal, as always, we appreciate your time. What do you make of the case? What do you make of Suu Kyi's defense?
Well, it's an interesting defense. It is not very convincing, and for several reasons. But basically what she tried to do is to say that, look, the picture that the ICJ has been given by the applicant, which is Gambia, is too narrow. We have to look at the broader facts. And what she tried to do was say, look, we've been holding counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist actions and operations, which are called clearance operations, since the 1960s. And that's basically, we have to look now at the situation, she says. It's a non-international armed conflict between the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army and Tatmadaw, the armed forces, as well as some Buddhist militia. Now, she says, well, there have been some excesses. She tries to give a little bit of ground. And interestingly, she says, in the 2008 Constitution, there's military justice, and there have been trials, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you look a little bit more closely at her claims, which are basically to say that, and also she says, there's complementarity, which means that it's up to Myanmar to prosecute using military justice and not to jump to the International Criminal Court or to international solutions. Yeah. Now, if you look at those claims, they fall apart pretty quickly. The reasons are the following. First of all, the ARSA, the Arakan army, which she claims is supported by Afghanistan and Pakistan, et cetera, doesn't at all seem to fit her characterization as a real threat, number one. Number two, the military trials she's been talking about, we haven't seen any credible cases. We've seen, I think, one or two out of all the violations that have been going on. And she says, well, we started a court-martial in November 25, 2019. This is just 3 weeks ago. This problem has been going on since 2016. What the hell have they been doing? So this is not very convincing. If you look at the facts and the numbers, it falls apart pretty quickly. The other thing she said, if I may just complete this thought, is that she said, how can it be that we have genocidal intent on the part of the Myanmar forces when we're prosecuting, and we have courts of military justice? Yeah. Well, they're not exclusive. The Nazis also prosecuted some Nazi soldiers and officers, but they also had clearly genocidal intent. So it's a bit of a non sequitur there.
Indeed. Lyal, one of the things that people have said when it comes to just the laws, the internationals right now, when it comes to the Geneva Convention, Genocide Convention, they say that the Gambia would have to prove that it currently has a disagreement directly with Myanmar. And many are saying that legally, for Gambia to be able to prove that may prove difficult, and that the Myanmar and Aung San Suu Kyi may ride on that then to get themselves out of this.
It's still a possible objection, but I saw this earlier as an obstacle. But the fact is that Myanmar has and Aung San Suu Kyi has decided to show up herself, which is great. I'm glad to see that, and I think it's for not necessarily reasons of justice, but and I don't want to sound very cynical here, but there are 2020 elections coming up in Myanmar, and some people have suggested that it's to rally her support, and apparently there's been a lot of popular support in Myanmar for her standing up against foreign interference, et cetera, et cetera. So strangely enough, Aung San Suu Kyi seems to be quite proud to defend her government's record, which is a really shameful one, and maybe for very cynical political reasons. Now, that's a little bit speculative on my part, but the point of that is that we seem to be beyond the I think, the jurisdictional element of a dispute. And in any case, Article 9 of the Genocide Convention clearly says that one state party to the Genocide Convention can bring another state party to the convention, which is the case. Gambia and Myanmar, both state parties to the Genocide Convention, shall submit their disputes on interpretation and application of the convention to the International Court of Justice. So I think now that is cleared. And so what Aung San Suu Kyi and her agent, William Schabas has argued is, well, in order to, at this stage, for Gambia to succeed in its application to have provisional measures, which is for an immediate cessation of these very harmful activities that the armed forces are engaging in against the Rohingya. There has to be proof of subjective intent, which is a very hard thing to prove.
Indeed. So do you however, in the middle of all this, Lyal, I do apologize for cutting in, but in the middle of all this, certainly are human beings. Rohingya are right now stuck in Cox's Bazar and elsewhere, suffering obviously because they're not in their homes back home in Myanmar. Do you think that situation will at any level be resolved through this process? Because this, from what I've understood, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, can be stretched for years, this process, right?
I'm confident that the way is open to have some quick resolution to the suffering. I don't want to sound overly optimistic or idealistic, but what I'm going to say is that Myanmar, if it shows the political will, and at least they've showed up at the ICJ, which is a major thing, if they feel that, yes, they would respect the ICJ's provisional orders, and the ICJ decides to order one of the requests of the Gambia, which is for the safe return, dignified resettlement back from the people that are in Cox's Bazar back to their home areas. That would relieve the situation quite a lot. So there is that possibility, and it does depend on the political will and the respect. If there's, if Aung San Suu Kyi would show that for the international rule of law. So, we're seeing that she's come in person. That's a very important sign. And that is a very high profile. And let's be hopeful that maybe she would, that the ICJ would order this provisional, orders, and that they would be respected. That's a possibility.
Okay. Well, we'll leave there at that, Lyal. But of course, as always, we appreciate you taking your time out to share your insight with us. Time, of course, on a very important case that is in front of the International Court of Justice. Viewers, that of Gambia bringing this case against Myanmar of genocide or genocidal intention at the very least against the Rohingya peoples. As we know, 700,000 of them currently have left the country, fleeing persecution there as their homes have been razed, ransacked, and they're not being welcomed back. The situation back home in Myanmar is not such for these refugees to return back to their own country. Rohingya is a word that Aung San Suu Kyi has not even used in her defense when speaking about the very people who we all, of course, see as the world's most persecuted minority, that according to the United Nations itself. We'll keep a very close eye on that situation at the ICJ. Certainly this may stretch for years, but will the court ask for provisional measures to defend the Rohingya people? That too, we'll wait and see. I'll leave it there for now, though. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.